Hello, and welcome to this Wigtown Wednesday. I'm Lee Randall, and tonight I'm talking with Kathleen Hart about her memoir, Devagilla Days. It's out now from Two Roads Press. As ever, we love everyone to join the party, so you can put questions to us on YouTube, Facebook, and on the festival website, and they'll come through, and I'll get to as many of them as I can. I'll also remind you that Kathleen's book is for sale in the festival website, which you can order online. And I'm reliably informed she's been in to visit and has signed many, if not all, of the copies that are in the festival bookshop. And then finally, if you can afford it, it's always great to make a donation to the festival to make events like this possible in the future. So here we go. It's my belief that Wigtown is becoming the most written about small town in Scotland, and that will not surprise anyone who's visited and fallen under its spell. But for Kathleen Hart, Wigtown is more than just a charming place to bide. It's been nothing short of life-saving. Over the course of the next hour, you're going to find out why. So welcome, Kathleen. It's lovely to have this hour to talk to you.
Thank you, Lee, and welcome to everybody who's joining us.
What I'd like to do is actually go back. In the back of the book, in the bio, it tells us that you were educated at a convent school in Cheshire and that you had some different jobs, including air hostess and antiques dealer. But you also write at the start of the book that you were sinking beneath the flotsam and jetsam of an unfulfilled promise. And I think it'll be really powerful for people to hear about your life before you got ill, before you moved to, and before you went through all that you went through that led to you coming to Wigtown. Can you sort of sketch out what things were like for you?
Well, I suppose before I wrote the book, Devagilla Days, and leading up to that time, before my illnesses, life was pretty bog standard, normal. I had an upbringing in Cheshire, went to a convent school, left school, started as an air hostess with Dan Air.
Mm-hmm.
Still here to tell a tale, and went on to fly with BA, and then just carried on. Got married, had children, became a housewife, was a bit Stepford wife, and one day had a bit of a road to Damascus moment, and thought, actually, there must be a bit more to life than this. What am I doing, and how am I going to change? How am I going to live my life the way I really want to live it? And just on the cusp of that decision, I was then diagnosed with breast cancer and became very ill. So it was a bit of a crossroads at that time. And then from there, the rest is written about.
Yeah. And is that when you decided to go back to uni?
Yeah. So I went back to uni when my children were just about old enough to not fend for themselves, but just old enough to make their own decisions. And I thought it'd be quite a good idea as well to show them that it's possible to keep, and not reinventing yourself, but it's possible through life to keep doing things and changing and taking on new challenges. So I went to Oxford for a year and did a degree there, and that kind of put me off on my journey. I was going to take over the world. I was going to conquer everything. I decided I was, going to be really take control of life. But then, life's very cruel, and I got a bit of a slap in the face. And no, you're not going to do that just now. You're going to get into hospital and get your health sorted out.
Well, I suspect with the success of this book, you may still take over the world. So I'm going to watch and wait. But let's talk about that. Your medical history, which you don't hit us with all at once. You kind of put it out in dribs and drabs, which unfortunately is not how it happened for you. It's very sobering reading. If I just do a quick list, and I don't mean to sound the least bit cavalier about any of this, you had a hysterectomy, you had breast cancer, you had trouble with a reconstruction, you had open heart surgery, you had disc surgery, you had to have rehab to learn to walk again. You had pneumonia, you had infections, you had something I'd never even heard of called red man syndrome. There was pain, anxiety, fatigue. I presume that this book was really difficult to write because you had to revisit all of that.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you steel yourself to do that? It's kind of a big decision to open that door, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a big decision. I think mainly egged on by Instagram friends, because I've got a following on Instagram who, behind the scenes of Instagram, I'd get messages frequently of people who are going through ill health, divorce, grief, and I'd post a daily post, a little positive quip, and that was received so well. I thought, actually, maybe if I wrote a book about it, of what I've been through, and life isn't over, and you never give up hope, and you just keep going one step in front of the other, it might help other people. But I found it really difficult to write about the illnesses. I mean, people ask me, it must have been so cathartic to write about that. No, it was not cathartic in the least. I found it a real struggle. And my publishers, right at the beginning, I mean, I didn't want to write it all in one go, because it would have been a bit too harrowing to read all about it. And being told to dig deeper, I thought, I've dug as deep as it's going to be. That's it. And I think it's enough. It just gives people a taste of it. And if they're going through similar things, then they know, what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it ate up, what, 8-10 years of your life? One thing just seemed to lead on after another. Are you comfortable to talk a little bit about what happened and what it was like being in and out of hospital?
Oh yeah, I don't mind at all. Well, I've written about it, so I don't mind. It was grueling and relentless, and you just think you're getting over one hurdle, and then another one hops up. It was like playing whack-a-mole. And I suppose one of the biggest hits for me was on my 5-year breast cancer anniversary, which is normally when you're discharged and sent away and told, thank you very much, it's done. I was called back in and diagnosed with a tumour in my chest. So I think that was particularly cool, because you're almost waiting for that anniversary. You think 5 years, it's going to be great. I'm fine. I'm off the hook. And of course, in the meantime, during my breast cancer treatment, I was encouraged by one of the nurses to start doing some restorative yoga, which went spectacularly wrong and slipped a disc. I wasn't well enough to have surgery. And so for a year, I had to wait until my lungs were strong enough to undergo surgery, which didn't go according to plan. I didn't cartwheel out of the ward like the surgeon said I was going to.
No.
Back in again, and I got an infection in theatre, and I was 3 months in hospital. And I had to wait for my spine to fuse back together again, and that was pretty challenging.
And as if that's not all traumatic enough, you were also coping with a lot of psychological trauma and loss, because you say that a relationship ended at that time. You had some financial. With all relationships, there are always financial dramas that ensue that have to be sorted out. But at the same time, you write about the generosity of your friends when you were still living in England. They made a whole rota of, they would come and spend time with you and to keep you not to be alone and all that, as well as your amazing kids who really stepped up. I have this belief that, well, first of all, the book is all about relationships, and we'll keep talking about those as we go on. But I have this belief that that kind of traumatic and prolonged illness really forces us to confront who we are, and for better or worse, who the people around us are. Would you agree with that? And what did you learn about that?
Yes, yeah, of course. You're going through something like difficult and challenging. You find out who your friends are, and you're often surprised, aren't you, in circumstances like that the people you expect that are going to stand up and be counted are not the ones necessarily who rally around to help you. And that was definitely my experience of being sick. People I least expected were often the ones who stepped up to the plate. And being in hospital leave for 3 months is, it's a big ask of your friends to come in every day. But there was always a rota of somebody to come in. And when you're lying prone in a brace and you can't move, you need somebody to be reading your notes at the end of the bed and asking the right questions and, pain relief and all the rest of it. So without them, literally, I don't know how I'd have got through it.
So often when people are ill, especially when they're facing potentially life-threatening illnesses, people around them feel like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I'm just curious, what were some of the most valuable things that your friends did for you? Because sometimes it's not the obvious thing, is it?
No, I suppose it's all about time, isn't it? Time is our most valuable asset that we have, and for people to give up their time to come to the hospital, to bring homemade food, to take laundry away, to just sit and chat, and go and chase up doctors, nurses, drugs. That's the biggest gift you can give somebody, and I think that's. Um, I mean, I don't know how people do it in hospital. I mean, was in a lot of hospitals, a lot of different wards, and I'd sit there and watch some people not have a visitor for days, and that's quite telling. I think having people, in fact, I'd recommend it to anybody watching. If you want to go and be a hospital friend or visitor for people who are long-term sick, I think it must be a very gratifying thing to do.
Yeah. Okay, so let's bring the story forward a little bit. You decided that you needed to really, my phrase for it is shake the rug. It's time to shake the rug. And you started looking for some place to live. Was Scotland always the dream and the goal, or was it just an accident? How did you find the cottage?
It was a complete accident. I still don't really understand how I got here. I think to start with, I lived in Cheshire, so I thought I don't want to be too far away. So I looked in the Lake District and I found a place called Wigtown, which was on the coast. Because one of the things I wanted to do most was to be on the coast. I'd spoken to my consultants and different doctors about how I was going to recover, how I was going to get my body in better shape. And one of the answers was, let's try, cold water swimming, because I think one of my consultants was a big fan of Wim Hof, and we spoke at length about. Do you know Wim Hof? Oh, Wim Hof is the Iceman. He's a Dutch chap who's completely bonkers, who does cold water immersion, but he breaks the ice. I mean, I haven't quite broken the ice yet. And he trains elite athletes about the power of cold water immersion and what it does for your lungs and your breathing. And because I've been so sick, I thought, actually, this sounds like I could do that. So anyway, Wigtown, I went to see a couple of houses in Wigtown in Cumbria, and then by accident came across a cottage for sale in Wigtown, and I thought it was a spelling mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a look at the details and mulled over it for quite a long time. I was only just out of hospital, so I was still struggling to function. And I drove up one day, saw the cottage, and the rest is history.
Well, you saw the cottage. Describe the cottage as it was then, because some people might be astounded that you purchased the cottage as it was then.
Yeah, I'm astounded. It was a complete mess. It was derelict shell, really. There was nothing inside it. Ivy was growing through the ceiling, through the roof. All the windows were cracked, broken. I'm just looking around now, thinking, because I'm obviously sitting in the cottage. The bathroom suite was avocado bath and navy blue sink. There was no kitchen. It was a complete mess. But that didn't put me off at all. Somehow it had a feel about it, and it spoke to me in some way. And so I put an offer in within about 15 minutes of landing here, which was on a November day, and it was blowing an absolute hoolie. It was pitch black, and I thought, if I like it now in November, it's going to be fine. And so I recklessly phoned the estate agent and said, I'll have it, which isn't like me at all. Normally I procrastinate for months and months about the smallest thing. So I did, and within about 15 minutes, she phoned me back and said, it's yours. And that's how it happened.
But given what I presume was the delicate state of your nerves and your definite delicate state of your health, why weren't you daunted? I'm so impressed. Why weren't you daunted by the prospect of you weren't going to obviously renovate it yourself physically, but you had to oversee it. You had to be on. It's a big project to renovate a house. Where did that strength come from? What pushed you into that?
I think it's a feeling, I think, when you've survived a serious illness, is that you have this sort of feeling that you're bomb-proof, and that if you've survived that, you can survive anything. And then I was very luckily, I got, by accident, the first tradesman who arrived was plumber who just took over and project managed it. And so really it wasn't that stressful. He just got on with it. And you become, when you've been very sick for a long time, priorities change. The things that normally I'd have worried about, choosing the right tiles, getting the right curtains, getting the, sorting out the paint colours, that didn't really matter. Everything was whitewashed white. Little things, it just became a project just to finish, to make my home, to become a sanctuary and somewhere to pull the drawbridge up. Detail didn't really matter. It was just, the first night I slept in here, I slept on a mattress upstairs on floorboards. I've never felt happier.
And not just the first night, months and months you were on the floor, weren't you?
Yeah, you've mattress shamed me.
No, I think it's a testament to your fortitude rather than anything to be ashamed of. You talked about sort of letting go of some of the details that might have obsessed you in the past. In your book, there's a quite striking scene where you talk about being at a ladies' lunch where people were, where the guest of honor was in fact a very expensive handbag. And you were comparing and contrasting, and I'm leading up to getting you to really explain this. You were comparing and contrasting the values and the activities of the life you were leading with what it is now. And you also talked about downsizing, because you had to leave a lot behind when you moved to Wigtown. Can you talk us through the contrast between a lunch where you sit around looking at a handbag, and also, your new capsule wardrobe and your new priorities?
Well, that was the light bulb moment, sitting in a wine bar in Cheshire as a handbag was passed around, and one of the parties sniffed it, and I thought, okay, I think this is time to make a few changes. It was, handbags and were my thing, and beautiful clothes and lovely homes, and none of that mattered because I was as sick as a dog for 10 years. It was all completely irrelevant. And I think you're on a sort of a conveyor belt. You're just on autopilot. You don't think about it until something catastrophic happens. And when that happens to you, you realise what's important in life, what your priorities are. And so that meant just getting rid of stuff. I was literally suffocating, and just downsizing. Sold the lot, got rid of it, gave it away, and arrived here with a few boxes. And again, that's a very it's very freeing. It's very liberating to do that, because there's no responsibility. You don't have anything to clean, to wash, to iron, to pack away. It's just day-to-day living in the present.
And was this the first time that you were really living completely on your own?
Yeah, I suppose it was, actually. I think about it. I suppose, I suppose since I was 18, I moved out and lived with friends. So yeah, it's the first time I've lived on my own. And again, that's a big challenge when you've never lived on your own before. All of a sudden, you have to be your own best friend, and that I found very difficult. Just sitting here thinking, what we're going to do now, because normally, there's a job to do, there's children to look after, or supper to be cooked, and all of a sudden you haven't got to do any of that. There are no restrictions, there's no rules. You're just in free fall, and that was quite difficult to adjust to start with. I like it now.
Well, it's liberating when there's no one to answer to, but at the same time, it must create was there a sense of unease, whether or not you could trust your body, whether you'd be safe on your own?
Every morning you wake up with that feeling, because you'd never know what's going to happen to you next. I mean, you wake up with a slight headache or a sore throat or whatever it is, and you think, oh God, what's next? So, not really. I think you just have to get up each day and, I breathe on the mirror and I'm alive and let's go. Because you can't think about that. I don't, I met somebody on the beach a few weeks ago who was telling me about their 5-year plan. And I was thinking, if I have a 5-week plan, I'm lucky. Yeah. There's no point in projecting forward when you've been through that. Each day, you're just thankful that you haven't got a sore throat or a headache or something happening. And actually, one of the most liberating things about lockdown for me was not having any hospital letters, which sounds a bit shocking, but each week, there's a couple of appointments come through the door. and you're off to hospital and different checkups, and that didn't happen during lockdown. That was quite refreshing.
Well, you did have not during lockdown, but there was a time when you woke up and you had a lump, didn't you? And you had to rush off. And again, if you didn't have a car or if you were too sick to drive, can you talk about that moment?
Well, that was the only thing when can you hear that? Somebody knocking on my door. That was the only thing that my children were worried about. I mean, you've been to Wigtown, Lee. It's a long way from the nearest hospital. Dumfries Hospital is an hour and a half's drive. So again, it's slightly reckless choosing somewhere that was so far away. In my old life, I lived 10 minutes from the nearest A&E, and I suppose that was a risk that I took. But touch wood, so far it's been fine.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that cracked me up was it seemed that every time you encountered someone in the street, they announced that they had been born in your cottage.
That's right.
How many are you up to now? How many people have been allegedly born in your cottage, and how many of them are actually born in your cottage?
I've got no idea. I think it's an urban myth of Wigtown. Everybody who walked past originally when all the work was going on outside would tell me a tale about who was born in the cottage and what went on here. I mean, it's 200 years old. You think it was 600 years old with the activity that had been carried on inside it. So I haven't really got to the bottom of that. I want to do some more research, but of course the library's been closed for a long time. There is some really good books and records in the library about the history, so I'll have to reinvestigate that when it's open fully.
And how long did it take you to get the renovations done?
Well, they're not quite finished. I think I've plateaued out. I think I came here in March 2017 and got on with it and did an awful lot of... Oh, Lee, do you know who's knocking at the door? Can you hear it?
I can hear it. All the world can hear it, dear. Everyone listening to this knows that you've got a visitor.
It's Scad.
Are you joking?
No, I'm not. I should perhaps just go and... I'm just wondering why he's knocking so violently.
Folks, this is a real Wigtown moment. Appreciate this.
Come and introduce him, and I'll give him. Oh, he's gone. It's carried on. Sorry, apologies about that. This is the thing, when you live right in the middle of Wigtown, there's always somebody knocking on your door or waving through the window. So yeah that was scary.
Doesn't he know you're famous and you're on the airwaves right now? Goodness.
He's more famous than I am, Lee.
Let's talk about the swimming. Partly because I have questions about it. It's a massive part of the book. There's a question from the audience about it. So you swim every single day, correct?
Yeah, every day. Well, there were a few exceptions to that. My daughter works in the RNLI, and she came up, and she's like Safi from Ab Fab. She thinks she's very sensible and I'm not sensible. So she did a little risk assessment and decided on the 2 places where I could swim. And sometimes if it's very windy, if it's a real gale, I don't go in. But other than that, I go in every day. Snow, I mean, the seaweed freezes sometimes in the winter. It's so cold. But I haven't broken ice yet, Lee.
No.
Would you like to come?
No, thank you. No, no. There are many things in the world that I don't need to do, and being colder than I am normally is just not one of them. But when did you? Is this the first time? One of our viewers want to know if you swam in cold water as a teenager, or if this is something new that you've just started doing.
Absolutely not. I wouldn't have gone near the water as a teenager. It's a recent thing, and I suppose sort of accidental. Just listening to the medical advice, how I could get my immune system going again, and anti-inflammatory. Cold water is brilliant for that. So I think I can almost feel my body saying thank you when I'm in the water. And it becomes very addictive. And if you don't go in every day, you really miss it. You get the swimmer's high, the endorphins start pulsing through your brain, and so you have a serotonin rush. It's a remarkable feeling. And
you don't wear a wetsuit, do you?
Definitely not. But you know what? If you want to go in the water and it means you wear a wetsuit, wear a wetsuit. Whatever, floats your boat. I don't wear a wetsuit because originally, I've got scars all over my body. To get a wetsuit on and off would have been very, very difficult for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So can you talk? The book is punctuated by swims, and between every chapter is a swim chapter. And I just wonder, could you describe a little bit the whole sensation? Do you plunge in? Do you tiptoe in? I presume the amount of time in the water varies depending on your schedule and how cold it is.
So I go at high tide every day, and high tide changes every day, and sort of about an hour adds on each day, which I quite like because it means each day I'm somewhere different at a different time. So my day hinges on high tide, and depending on which way the wind blows, I'll go to two different locations. I never plunge in. I always go in very slowly, and it's almost getting your breath under control. Once you get your breath under control in the water, it's fine. You can, it's easy.
Mm-hmm.
And then depending on the temperature, when it's 6 degrees in January, you don't stay in that long because hypothermia can set in after about 35, 40 minutes. And you don't really know it's setting in. It's not something that suddenly happens to you. It's a very slow, I felt it. Your brain goes very slightly out of focus, and things go quiet, and it feels quite pleasant. But then it's definitely time to get out.
Because that's the question everyone asks you, isn't it? Every single person says, "How cold is that water?"
Yeah.
You must be so sick of that.
It's interesting, isn't it? That's the first question that people ask: is it cold? I wonder why that is. I don't know. It doesn't even look that cold. We're in subtropical Scotland. The water is quite mild. It's the same as it is in Cornwall. But that's the first. It must look cold. But and I always say it's fine once you're in. And I always then invite everybody who asks that question to come and have a go. And they always say, like you, absolutely not.
I should, though. Anti-inflammatory would suit my medical conditions as well. Tell us about your spa treatments. You've got one that involves bladder rack. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Tell us about what goes on the beach.
Well, maybe somebody who's watching will correct this, but I read somewhere that the bladder rack, which is it's a seaweed that you find at high tide, and it's in little heart-shaped little pods. And somebody told me that the ingredient in it is what they use in creme de la mer. So I thought, oh right, yeah, I'll give it a go. So you collect these. I come out of the water. I've had my swim. If it's a warm day, I put these little pebbles, arrange them, and the pebbles warm up. So I massage my skin with the pebbles, which is, and it's a lymphatic thing. And then you pop a pod, and a clear liquid comes out, and then you just rub it. You rub it into your skin, and that's it. And that's why I look 50 and I'm really 80.
Stop. Tell the audience about Knitting Lady, who I found very intriguing because of her. She always has a companion with her. Oh, can you talk about this?
I've not seen Knitting Lady for a long time. Thank you for reminding me about her. Yeah, she comes to the beach and with binoculars. I think she's a bird watcher, and parks her car right on the beach, and has a car seat next to her with a life-size plastic doll. And she'll birdwatch for a while, and then she has a tea towel which she tucks into the side of her driver's window and has a snooze. It's just one of the surreal moments out of many surreal moments.
I've been puzzling about this. Do you think that the life-size doll is the model that she fits her knitting on, or you just think it's her companion?
Maybe it's a combination of the two.
I may be spending way too much time worrying about this.
Next time I see her, I'm going to knock on the window and ask her for you.
Okay. Now, you've gotten truly, properly stuck in Wigtown. If there was a class you could go to, whether it was beekeeping or watercolors or knitting, you went to it. And I think that's a great tactic when one moves to a small town, because how else are you going to meet and greet and get to know people? Are any of these things activities you did before moving to Wigtown?
No, definitely not. And I mean, I'm not a knitter and definitely not a watercolor painter. And I didn't have access to bees. So Scottish country dancing was definitely not available in Cheshire. So
Right.
And I think what I did when I came here, Lee, was I wasn't well enough to do any of those things right at the beginning. And I just sat back and watched, and just to see how the town worked and what the politics were, and the different factions. I just wanted to, before I took the plunge, literally, I wanted to see what went on. And then I decided the best way to join in the different groups would be to, put my name down for these different classes.
And I presume that it was more to meet people and more about the people and the companionship than the activity itself, or would that be a misreading?
It's definitely more than about the activity. I'll never be a knitter, and my painting's absolutely hopeless. So I think what it was about was I wanted to meet local people. I wanted to meet Wigtonians, and I wanted to listen to their stories, and I wanted to. I think as well, I've had a lot of operations. My brain doesn't work very well, as you can probably hear. It gets to about 8 o'clock at night and the fog sets in. So sitting and having to focus on how to knit and how to beekeep and just really get my brain working again. I think that's what I was interested in, just different activities to get to recharge that.
One of the lovely things is that it comes across very clearly that Wigtown was very generous. The spirit is very generous, that people have been incredibly friendly and welcoming and kind and thoughtful. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the reception you've had since moving to town.
Yeah, well, I have a friend in Cheshire who jokes that you found El Dorado, and maybe to some people it does seem that I paint this picture of Wigtown, and I read a review on one of the advanced reader copies that somebody had written that said, it's all very nice, but I'd like to hear about the struggle she had with the community when she got there. But there weren't any. I was welcomed, and and at first I found it quite strange. That wasn't my life before, that people would leave eggs and tomatoes on the doorstep, or knock on the door to see if you're okay, if your curtains were closed a bit too long, or if you weren't in for a while. I'd never had that experience before, so it was quite was different to adjust to. And I found everybody here to be kind. I mean, you know Wigtown, Lee. You walk along the main street, it takes you half an hour to get from one end to the other because somebody wants to pass the time of day with you, or ask what you've been up to, or where you're going. You've been swimming. Sometimes if I'm going to the library, I have to go down the back lane just to get there in 3 minutes instead of 25 minutes. So yeah, for me, it's been the most positive experience.
What's been the sort of most surprising act of generosity?
I suppose, I think it's probably cake. It's fresh cake constantly on the doorstep. Lockdown was not good for me because there was constantly cake, and I think it's not big things. It's not surprising things. It's just a constant of small little gestures. These little random acts of kindnesses that happen every day, and even just a kind word, just saying hello and how are you, and a smile. Smile here. There must be something in the water. It's quite strange.
One of our viewers is asking, did you change the names in your book, and are you happy with the front cover? Not quite. Two separate questions there.
Names, there were a lot of names because there are a lot of characters. There's a lot of people in watercolour painting and knit and natter and bee club, and I suppose I wanted to give them all a bit of a mention. They're all characters in their own right, but of course you lose the reader if there are too many characters. So some of them were segued into each other, and some were just called the beekeeper or the cake maker, just to make it slightly less confusing for the reader. And the cover was the illustration is by Chris Wormel, who illustrated many of Philip Pullman's Dark Materials series. So I think the colours, at first, I wasn't sure about how vibrant it was, but actually in the last week or so, yes, and that's my little cottage there. And I suppose that coming into summer now, that's exactly what it looks like. The bay is blue, the heather's beginning to sparkle away on the hillside. So yeah, it's exactly what it looks like.
Yeah, it's quite beautiful. So here you are, you're in this community. You've not been here all that long, and then you decide to write a book about them. So did you ever think, I could be run out of town on a rail. The pitchfork mob might come. Was that ever a hesitation that you thought about maybe moving it to a different place or fictionalizing it? Did any of those things concern you?
There's still time for that, Lee.
No, 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 no.
No, none of it concerned me because I haven't. What I've written isn't mean. It's my
not.
No, is my take on what's happened to me since I've been here, and I've been kind about everybody because that's how I've lived life. That's been my experience. So, I mean, if I had written a tongue in cheek or a scathing book about Wigtown, then yeah, I probably would have renamed it or moved house. But I haven't. That's not what I've written.
Yeah, yeah. Can you tell us about, and I had to write it out phonetically, can you tell us about the saint for whom you've named your cottage? Because her story is very important to you.
Yeah, she is. Well, so I wouldn't necessarily call her a saint. She's a Scottish princess, Lady of Galloway, 13th century. And she just really appealed to me that she was a woman who had 9 children. She married very young, an arranged marriage, which turned into a love match. And her husband died young. And I just like the romance of the fact that she had his heart embalmed and then carried it around in a silver casket every day of her life. And so she was on her own, sort of building bridges, building Balliol College. She had a lot of gumption, and I sort of admire that in her. And she actually even would set a place at the table for the heart. And when she had dinner, the heart would have dinner too.
So I'm guessing she never remarried.
I don't think so. No.
Sorry. Yeah.
I think that was her match. Yeah. So
yeah.
She was a feminist in the 13th century, and I just really like the sound of her. I mean, I'd quite like to go and visit the archive. I think Balliol have got an archive, so it'd be interesting to delve a bit deeper.
Yeah. I should have Googled to see if I could see a picture of her, a drawing of her.
Oh, here we go. Would you like to see?
I would love to see one.
It's not a very good picture. Can you see that? So that's Devagilla and John Balliol, and that's the statute for Balliol College, and it's by Puget, but it's not a very good it's not a very good picture. But there's only 2 other paintings of her, and both of them were done centuries further on.
Yeah.
But I like to think of her as a sort of a bonny lassie.
Tremendous. Another thing you talk about is because with any relocation, one establishes new rituals and new routines, and one of yours is visiting the Torhouse stones. Can you tell us what those are and why you go so often?
So Torhouse Circle is about 2 or 3 miles out of Wigtown, going towards Stranraer, and it's a stone circle. There are 19 stones, and it's just squashed into the corner of a farmer's field. And you drive past and think, what was that? And it's like Stonehenge, a mini version of Stonehenge. There are 3 stones down the middle, and you little lay-by, and you park and go in, and there's just this real sense of history of well, it's 5,000 years old. So I just sit there and just think about who's wandered through it. Drovers and shepherds and cattle drivers and milkmaids, just all the soldiers, lots of soldiers, and their stories and their history, and just a real sense of time. And actually, when you feel the stones, it's granite stone, they almost feel warm to the touch. There's almost an energy about it, I think.
Gosh. When you talk about the stones, that's the part of the book where you talk a little bit about intuition and the idea of having an almost mystical connection with the place. Could you recount the story of the woman you met on the beach when you went moon gazing?
So is this, which woman is it? Is this one who is the faith healer?
Yes, I believe so.
Mm.
She seemed to know things about you that nobody else knew.
So the faith healer was a lady who was sitting, actually knitting, near the spot where the other lady knits in her. There's a lot of knitting going on, isn't there?
It's cold. People don't have central heating.
And I was it was a particularly bad day for me. I was in a lot of pain, and I hobbled into the sea. and had a swim. And of course, it's a pain-free zone for me in the sea. It's a release. Got out again in severe pain and shuffled back up the beach. And this lady actually said, "Are you in pain?" And I thought, yeah, it was quite obvious from the way I was behaving. And she said, "Can I help you? And when you're in pain, you'll take anything." And so she lay her hands on me on the beach, and I'm standing. I think it was it's a late October day, quite cold. I was in a freezing wet swimsuit, and she sort of moving her hands up and down my body and chanting away. And that's exactly the sort of expert. You might be talking about another lady that I met on the beach who, right at the very beginning of the book, who we spoke about. She asked me what I was doing there, how had I ended up in Wigtown, and I said I don't know, I've no idea. We had a chat, and I said it's one of the reasons I'm here is because I've been so ill, and at the time I had a very big scar, quite sore, and she said I've seen your scar, don't ever be embarrassed about it. And she turned and lifted her shirt at the back, and she had her own big scar, and so she told me the backstory about that, which was really intriguing and actually terribly sad. And then she said, "I think you've been blown here. That's how you've got here." But I wonder what it is about meeting and talking to people on the beach. It's such a beautiful place. It's the view from there. I don't know if you know it, Lee. It's at Garliston, the back of Garliston Harbour. You're looking out across the Galloway Hills to the west, and to the south, it's the Cumbrian Hills. It's a place that inspires. It's a very calming place. Maybe people want to share their stories. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I find Dumfries and Galloway breathtakingly beautiful, just so gorgeous. Another element of your recovery was, because you've alluded to this before, and it brings us back again to the idea of the generosity of humanity. You joined Instagram. I believe it was your daughter who suggested it.
Yeah.
And discovered that you got a lot of followers, you got a lot of back and forth and repartee, and kindness and generosity and goodness came out of it. Can you talk about your experience because I think you joined with one idea and you ended up with a completely different benefit, did you not?
Yeah, I think so. I think, well, yes, it was in the beginning, it was just for me to, Instagram is a very interesting concept. People have got different notions about social media, that it's an aggressive, negative place. For me, Instagram has never been about that. It's always been a kind, supportive, encouraging place, mainly because the first sign of anybody trolling or being rude is just delete, block. But that's only happened 2 or 3 times in the whole time with all the followers I have on Instagram. I think it's about it's a lovely it's another community, a virtual community as opposed to the physical community here, of people who are supporting each other and encouraging each other. And the other interesting thing about that is as well, I get care packages and gifts sent from all over the world from the Instagram community as well.
Wow.
I know, and now it's getting to the stage where they'll just write the address to something like Wild Swimmer Wigtown or Posh Peddler Booktown, and it gets.
Yeah.
And the last thing I had was the lady in Canada who sent me 2 lovely jars of honey, and she sent them to me because she had to send them because before the brown bears got it. And so all over the world, people are sending me. Somebody from Tasmania sent me some beautiful pieces of jewelry. There's ladies in Texas who send me poems and books. It's a real window into literally another world. In the beginning, it was about cakes and flowers and interior design, and now it's kind of flipped, as you said, into me. Each day I do a post and write a caption about many steps forward. If I can get through it, you can get through it. And to some people that sounds really cheesy and artificial, but you'd be stunned at the response to that.
I have to say the state of the world right now, a little bit of cheesy and happy and things to be grateful for. I'm here for that. I think you are as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's enough criticism. People are very easy to quick to criticize, and there's so much of that. I think sharing pictures of beautiful flowers and interiors and gardens. What's wrong with that? Let's have a little bit of beauty in our lives and lift the spirits, feed the soul. I'm all for that.
Yeah. Another question from the viewers is, what are the best things for you about living in Wigtown? And is there anything you miss about your old life?
Oh, I was thinking about that today. I actually thought that question might come up. Is there anything I miss? Because I just had friends up from London for a long weekend, and they brought a big hamper full of cheese, and it was and I thought, oh, it's really nice to have different cheese. And apart from that, couldn't really think about what else I missed. I often go down to visit my daughter. My daughter lives in Dorset. My son's in Cheshire. And I'm so excited about going down there and going to John Lewis and going out for supper and shopping. And after about 4 or 5 days, I thought the traffic's horrendous. They've got traffic lights here and roundabouts. I don't like it. It's very busy, and it makes me realise how much I manage my life here. How I'm attracted to the calm and the tranquility of this place.
I think that many people over the past 18 months have been forced into a reckoning that you were forced into by ill health about what can I shed and what do I really value? You're in the vanguard there, Kathleen. I want to just tell you, this isn't really a question, but it's beautiful. Nicholas says, after reading your book, it will be one that will stay in my heart forever and give me encouragement throughout my life. So I wanted to share that with you.
Thank you. And I've had a lot of feedback and reviews similar to that, and that's kind of where I'm with. Going back to Instagram, those are the sorts of comments I get when I post a positive, or it'd be a poem or a little passage from something. And sometimes it just takes a little reminder, doesn't it? Just a little insight, a little nudge into how you can live your life. Just small things.
Yeah. Given that you hadn't written a book before, I'm just a little curious, a little process question. How did you go about approaching writing a book, and what did you find easy and what did you find terrifying about it?
The actual writing, the creative process itself, in the very beginning, in the raw stages, I really enjoyed that. So I had to take myself up to the bird room in the library with my journals and a flask and just sit, and the ink just gushed out of the pen. The minute somebody said, we want you to do it like this, and can you hand it in 3 months' time? That was, that's pressure, and that sort of changes the whole outlook on it. And the first thing I did, Lee, because I've never written a book before, I didn't have a clue what I was doing, was go into the library on the ground floor of the county buildings and see if there were any books about writing. And there was one, and it was Stephen King's On Writing. And the thing I took away from that was that he could write 2,000 words in a day, and I didn't know he could do that. So I got all my journals, all my pieces of paper, and all the scraps and everything. I thought I had a deadline, and I knew what I had to do, and I almost had a spreadsheet to make sure I got it in time. But if Stephen King can do it in 2,000 words a day, I could have a go as well. And that was kind of the process, really.
Yeah. Did you find yourself, saying, I'm going to reveal this part of my life, no, and then erasing? How did you juggle that? There's a fine line, isn't there, between your own and other people's privacy and wanting to get a certain portion of the story out. That's something that's tricky to negotiate, no matter how many books you've written, much less your debut.
I think, that's interesting, because I moved here to pull the drawbridge up and be anonymous and hide away and heal. And if you look at my Instagram account, I think I've got something like 1,400 posts. And it was only 3 or 4 weeks ago. You'll find a photograph of me. I hate having my photograph taken. People on Instagram didn't know whether I was a man or a woman. They didn't know my name. And then all of a sudden, I've put my head above the parapet and just sort of regurgitated lots of personal things about my life. So that's an interesting thing to do when you've moved somewhere to be private and just tuck yourself away. But I think, again, it's about, originally it was a legacy for my children. I wanted them to know that wherever you are in life, whatever stage you're at, there are still opportunities. You can still change your life and do things differently.
Mm-hmm. Another question is, what piece of advice would you give someone thinking about writing their own story?
What piece of advice? I think I would just do it. Just each day get some blank journals. I started off keeping a swimming diary. So it started off with the temperature of the water, what the weather was like, what the clouds looked like, were there any birds, and then to start off with something small, just do a couple of lines a day and grow it. But the only way to do writing is to write. It's a muscle, and you have to train it, and you have to focus. You've got to give yourself time and sit down in that allotted time and write something.
And had you kept journals before? Is that something you've done all your life?
No, I've never done it before.
Oh.
And again, that was my daughter's fault, because when I moved here, I had a bit of a wobble in the beginning. What am I doing here? Why have I done this? And she said, just write down every day what you've done and what you've got to be grateful for. Again, it's a cliche, gratitude diaries, but I started doing that, and you look back, you flick through it, and you think, oh gosh, yeah, that's I did that. And I suppose as well, it's a chronology of how my health improved.
Yeah.
So, and that's how I started, just by keeping journals and writing a swimming diary.
One person wants to know, do you have a cat?
I don't have a cat, no.
They may offer you one. I'll monitor the box. Another person is asking, have your children read the book? And if so, how did they feel reading about your journey?
They both read it. They had to read it as part of the legal read, because there are personal bits about them that obviously they need to know about and to okay. That was they were in the book, and what I'd written about them was fine. My daughter cried all the way through it, and my son, who is sort of still waters run deep, since it's been published, actually has sent the most lovely cards. And I don't know if you know this, Lee, but in the beginning, 4 years ago, when I bought my cottage, my daughter was all for it and cheerleading, very rah rah rah, and my son was, what have you done that for? What are you going to do there? What? How are you going to live? And in March this year, he bought a little cottage just behind the county buildings. So he's had a complete turnaround and loves it, and is going to come up and live here. So I think both of them are proud. I'm not sure about the word proud, but I think they're happy to see me happy.
Yeah. It's interesting, of course, because they were witnesses to the entire ordeal. But I think when it's contained between the binding of a book, it becomes something. It almost takes on its own identity, doesn't it?
I think so, and I was very careful with both of them about how much they saw and how much they were exposed to, because some of it was pretty brutal what I went through.
Yeah.
And I think maybe going back and reading that, I think I suppose the thing is that I'm sitting here and healthy and so far so good. If the outcome had been different, then obviously they'd have thought differently. But I think I think they're both very sensible, much more sensible than I am. And I think reading it, they think me being here and making the move, taking control of my life, I think they feel inspired by that. I don't know. Who knows? I'll ask them.
Maybe your son will write a book about moving to Wigtown.
I've asked him to, Lee. I said, you you keep a journal. You like cycling, keep a cycling journal, and because his house is a complete state, so even if he just writes every day about the progress that's being made.
I'm racking my brains trying to figure out which one he's bought, but I'll ask you off camera. There's another question from the audience, which very much dovetails with my final question to you. Paula is curious to know, will you continue to write about life in Wigtown? And of course, my final question just simply says, what next? What's your next project?
So I have continued to write about Wigtown, even though during lockdown it was a very different story, because October Club, Scottish country dancing, knitting natter, everything's shut down and still hasn't reopened. So I've written about it, but with a different slant, I suppose, really. And as I said before, what next? I don't look too far into the future. I just take each day and we'll see what happens.
Wow. It's an inspiring story. I'm just going to hold it up again, and I'm going to encourage everyone to purchase a copy, a signed copy through the bookshop if they can get hold of it. And it's time now to say thank you for being with us, and thank you for your generous, open answers. And because the audience is not here to give you a round of thankful applause, I will. That's my job. And to thank everyone who came along for being with us tonight. And I hope you enjoyed it. So thanks very much.